Welcome to another episode of SJS Recommends. Today we are gonna talk about Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life from 1956, starring James Mason. So this film is about a middle-class family, and the man in the middle-class family has some health problems, so he starts taking this experimental drug. But then after he starts taking it, his behavior starts changing and he starts going quite mental and quite insane. So that's the basic plot of the film. So it's basically a bit like The Shining, but also very different. So what did you think of this film?
Yeah, this film is great. I mean, I'm a big Nicholas Ray fan. Obviously, I love his movies. I love his explorations of like broken people, and also the way he like explores themes of like, social commentary in there. But he just the way that he puts a film together. It's great. It's great. I loved Bigger Than Life. Yes, loved it. And here it is. It's on Criterion if anyone's interested.
So this was my second time watching the film. First time I watched it in the cinema in BFI South Bank in probably
Oh,
2009.
lucky you.
Yeah, 2019, I think, and I was absolutely blown away then. And fortunately, I still loved it on my second watch, although I probably didn't like it quite as much as in the cinema back in the day, but I still consider it to be like an all-time favorite and a great film. And one kind of important disclaimer to say about this film is that the studio kind of messed up the ending. Again, Nicholas Ray would have wanted a different type of ending, but the studio forced the film to have a different type of ending, which of course happened often at this time in Hollywood. But of course, as we are now in the spoiler-free discussion, I'm not going to say what the ending is, but I'm just warning you guys that you might be disappointed by the ending as it wasn't as it was supposed to be. But I think the ending is still, it's fine, and it doesn't ruin the whole movie, even though I would have preferred probably what Nicholas Ray himself wanted for the ending, but it's hard to say, of course, as we only see this version of the films.
So obviously we're in the spoiler free, so we're not going to talk about the details, but definitely if you've seen the movie, join for the spoiler part of the discussion, or once you watch the film, join the spoiler part of the discussion. But I do feel like he cleverly subverted the intentions of the studio. He did something, and we can discuss that after, because I was interested to get your thoughts, because I was like, you can tell that he's like, I don't agree with this, so I'm going to present it in such a way that actually doesn't give you it like a period. It doesn't say that's actually the ending. It actually it leaves a question mark. So I think he's cleverly subverted it. Although I agree with you, if it would have been something different, could have added more power to the film. But in a way, that struggle reflects in some ways the struggles in the film. So I think it turns out to become a very interesting ending that basically enhances the dialogue around the issues he's actually talking about. And so I feel like in a way he ends up winning by doing it this way anyways, because of how clever he is in subverting it. But we can discuss that.
Yeah, I do at least partly agree with what you are saying, but again, let's leave it up to the spoiler discussion later. But again, this is a film that, again, if you have, all people who are watching this have probably at least seen The Shining. So I think people who have seen The Shining and like The Shining might like this film too, as it has lots of the similar types of things, even though the tone, the visuals are very different. And this isn't necessarily like a horror movie, even though it's kind of disturbing when you think about it. But it's still more of a kind of a classic Hollywood kind of family drama thriller, I guess, more than a horror film. And I was also thinking that this would also make a good double bill with Night of the Hunter. I think that would be such a fun like 3 hours to spend like watching these two 90-minute films back to back. So because they, I mean, have some similarities, and of course, as they are from the same period of cinema, in that way, stylistically, they are more similar. Although, of course, Night of the Hunter is a black and white film, and Bigger Than Life is color film, so the look is very different. And Night of the Hunter goes for that kind of German expressionism thing, but still, like, in terms of the plot and the characters and stuff like that, there's lots of similarities between those films, and I actually saw both of them in BFI South Bank, funnily enough. So
Yeah, I'd say that what's interesting is this film could appeal to different kinds of people. So, like you said, like The Shining, if you like The Shining, if you like kind of man unhinged, like paranoia exploration. So, I mean, if you liked In a Lonely Place or other Nicholas Ray films, you'll definitely like this. I think it's interesting because it's like part terror, it's part heartbreaker of a film. So if you're also about, explorations of something unfortunate happening to what seem like pretty like kind of good everyday people, and the impact it has on their life, it's also in great exploration in that regard. I mean, if you like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, you'll like this for sure. Like, so I think it can appeal to a lot of different people for different reasons, just because how well made it is, and the interesting performance and the curious aesthetic of the performances, not the film aesthetic itself, but the aesthetic of the performances themselves are so curious and so interesting, and it could double bill with a lot of different films. I was thinking one as well, and I can't remember now which one. I was saying to my wife that I'm like, that could be a really good double bill to see them together. But yeah, I like your ideas with double bills. Definitely Night of the Hunter. It'll be a great double bill with the Night of the Hunter for sure. Did you say there's another one you said too, right? You said Night of the Hunter, and the other one you said The Shining. What else did you say?
I said those two, but I think also like to add to the conversation, there are lots of similar themes to David Lynch films, because we see that these dark things kind of boiling under the middle class world, which is obviously very big in Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, especially. So I think Blue Velvet would work well with this one as well, and that would be such a fun night to watch this and Blue Velvet back to back, as they are both like insanely entertaining films. And of course, this would probably work well with an Hitchcock film like Vertigo, for example, or even like Rear Window and things like that. It has a bit of that vibe. And I think for people who maybe don't like that classic Hollywood is often maybe too positive and too happy, I think for people like that, this film could work, as it is way darker and also, I would say, way deeper than many Hollywood films of the time. So in that way, it would even work with something like Sweet Smell of Success. That
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah,
those darker films of that era that I really love, because they kind of go against the norm, which is something I always appreciate.
Yeah, there's another film, the Burt Lancaster film, Elmer Gantry. I think it would be great with Elmer Gantry as a doubleheader too. So yeah, it could go doubleheader with a lot of films. But the Lynch, I totally agree. That's definitely there with Twin Peaks themes and stuff. So you can, in a way, sense like how influential Nicholas Ray is as a director. Because he is quoted, he has inspired this, and he was early in trying to undo the whole suburban dream and then turning it into the whole horror of Suburban Nightmare. And but at the same time, at the core of it, this heartfelt. This is the thing. It's not just for entertainment, this unhinging, but it's actually a heartbreaker of a story. About broken dreams, so which we'll get into the themes and stuff like that. So yes, highly recommend. Obviously, most most everything you're saying and you suggest and I watch. I highly recommend all of them. Like Autumn Afternoon, highly recommended. This highly recommended. Great double bill with many films. Like you said, Sweet Smell of Success. That would be an amazing 2 films to watch like on a Saturday. Double bill. Like just load up on the popcorn and stuff like that. And yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's just a matter of time when I will put Night of the Hunter Blu-ray into the player again, because I feel really meaning to watch it again. I've seen it a couple of times, once at home and once in the cinema, but it's such a great film, as we all know. But Godard was a huge Nicolas Ray fan, and I think when I was reading about this film a little bit in preparation, I think I saw somewhere that Godard thought that this was one of the 10 best films of the 1950s, or was it even that one of the 10 best films of all time? It was either one of those, but he again thought that Ray was like a giant of cinema, basically, and obviously I think we sometimes say that Johnny Guitar, for example, many people hated it when it came out, but the French critics liked it. Obviously the French intellectual culture is so different that, yeah, it's no wonder why they would have loved it already in the time when it came out. And Johnny Guitar obviously is another Nicolas Ray masterwork, and I'm glad that people love it now, but back in the day people didn't love it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with the statement. I do. For me, he is a giant. He feels like a giant. He's very important in what I enjoy, and I'm always blown away by what he's done. And even when I sing the awards, this film was nominated by, they were French awards, so Cahiers du Cinéma and something else. I think was French or European, which I think is really interesting. What you're saying, like obviously Godard loving him, but also him having this kind of reception outside that's greater than home, and that's happened to many filmmakers like Shulowski as well. Like, you know, he wasn't really cared about that much in Poland, but very much like adored in France. And so these things to go on, but I mean, then that goes to the good taste of the French to recognize that and recognize what this what he was doing in these films. And as you watch them, you uncover, yes, it still matters and it's still relevant. And in a way, I think anyone who's struggling with what we see today, you must watch this film to realize, oh, some of these things have been in the works for a long, long period of time. This is not new. This has been going on for a long period of time. And he was brave enough to kind of take on that tricky subject of bringing it to the light and putting it on screen and going against the kind of idealized images and more escapist type plots and all that, and really getting dark, like he did in A Lonely Place as well, like really getting dark. Or even The Lusty Men is another great Nicolas Ray film, exploring like masculinity and all that stuff in the culture of the rodeo and everything like that, and man's own ego and becoming unhinged and out of control in a form of mania. So I can't wait to talk about all the themes, because there's so many great themes in this film.
Yeah, so one more double bill that I was thinking. I mean, I don't have a specific film, but I think Samuel Fuller was one director who was very similar to Nicolas Ray, that they were both directors of that time that managed to fight against all the rules and the Hays Code and things like that, that they managed to make darker films and do their own thing, even with all the pressure. So
yeah, I would say Shock Corridor would be really great with this. That's a great Fuller kind of film, exploring even all the sanity, the line between sanity and truth and untruth, sanity and insanity, all these, exploring those lines. So it could be really great with Shock Corridor as well. But like you said, many Fuller films as well.
Yeah, my favorite Fuller film is White Dog. So
I haven't seen that yet. I'm dying to see that one.
Maybe we'll do it for the podcast.
I think
it was funny actually in my city. Like, there's this shop that sells like used Blu-rays and DVDs. They had the out of print Masters of Cinema here in my random city in Finland.
Yeah, like White Dog has been sitting there in my shopping list for even over a year, and I've been like, I want to get White because I really like Samuel Fuller. I'm like, yeah, I want to get White Dog. I wanna get White Dog, and now you mentioned it, so I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to pull that trigger and get that because I'm dying to watch that movie. So
Yeah, I fortunately have the out of print release. So yeah, but I think it's also on Criterion, and that should be in print. I think.
I don't know. The Masters of Cinema one is still available though. It's not premium price. So HMV and stuff still have copies of it, so I better scoop it up, I guess, if it's.
Yeah, if it's yeah. Yeah, I thought it was out of print actually. Maybe it is if it's still available, but I don't know.
Yeah. So okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, I think now it's time for the spoiler-filled discussion. And again, this is definitely a film for ones that where I think the spoilers do matter a lot. So yeah, so if you haven't seen the film, go watch it if you're interested. You can find it on Criterion, for example, and I'm sure it's probably available on other physical releases in other countries. And again, you can find it online too. So it's a fairly popular film, so it shouldn't be that hard to find.
Oh yeah, I'll throw in one more double bill for this film. One last.
Yeah.
It's Facing the Crowd. So yeah, that kind of confidence in your beliefs that's bordering on mania and all that kind of stuff. So that I think it would be great with a Face in the Crowd as well. So if you like Elia Kazan, if you like On the Waterfront, and if you haven't seen A Face in the Crowd, definitely watch A Face in the Crowd as well with this film. So I'll leave it at that. I won't think of any more now.
But yeah, so where should we start? So of course, I guess we should start with the aesthetics as we usually do. But so I mean, this to me looks like a fairly typical Hollywood film of the time. It looks really nice with those really like full colors and again lots of brown, and it looks really good. And it kind of creates this American suburban environment in a very good way. And there are some like really great shots, like for example when James Mason is looking at himself in the mirror and his wife breaks the kind of mirror, and then we see his body and then the broken mirror. So that's like a great shot, and I think I even used that for the thumbnail of this video. So that's a really great shot. But yeah, I mean, I don't have that much to say about the aesthetic, as it just looks very kind of normal of this time in my eyes, but it looks really good.
Yeah, it's a great aesthetic, and like you were mentioning before, the presence of similar ideas in Lynch films. So it's this idea of showing you the idealized suburban environment, which will cleverly contrast with what's going to happen in the events of the film. So very nice framed. You're in this nice world. That's what you feel like. So the aesthetic is not something meant to be overly interesting or overly engage you, but basically comfort you. You know, not put you in a fight or flight state, but really put you in this calm state. You're in a nice place. Even the beginning shots of him, like as a teacher, it almost reminded me of like the beginning of Indiana Jones in the first one. And he's teaching at the university here. It's high school, so that kind of professor, wearing very boring. He's wearing a bow tie. He's just very much a a teacher of that period. Everything is nice and simple, and it's black and white. And even watching this film, I kind of thought of the quote almost like something like the death of Leave It to Beaver. It's like it's the world of Leave It to Beaver in color, but it's going to get shattered, just like you're saying, that proverbial mirror that gets shattered. And of course, mirrors, extensive use of mirrors that we also have seen. I can't believe I forgot the filmmaker's name because I like him so much, but All That Heaven Allows, the director. I'm sorry,
Douglas Sirk.
Yeah, Douglas Sirk. Douglas Sirk's one of my favorites, and I can't believe my brain blanked on Douglas Sirk. But as much interesting use of mirrors as you would see in a Douglas Sirk film. So a lot of introspection is going on in this film, and that's shown through the mirrors. We are looking at, we are deeply observing society, people, the American dream, everything, and it's through this mirror and through this person, and that's part of the aesthetic. So very nothing amazing, unique in terms of the aesthetic, but that it's an aesthetic that fits with what the themes are and what we're trying to do with the film. So I think a very powerful aesthetic nonetheless.
Of course, the kind of main idea here is the dullness of the middle class life. They even use the word dull. Again, James Mason said that we are dull, they are dull, and
Yeah,
his wife is kind of offended at first, even though it's obviously true. But again, his life consists of, again, being a teacher, but then he has the taxi job, that like the calling service thing. So he has to work 2 jobs, and then he has to be a father and a husband and not be toxic at home. So he's like very alienated, and it's no wonder he has those health problems when he has so much things that he is responsible for. So I think it's, even though there's the truck that kind of makes him crazy, but I don't think that really matters, the truck. But it just shows that how this type of life makes you crazy and can make you crazy when you don't have any free time, no freedom, no leisure, again, and not many kind of very positive things in your life. Even though in the surface it obviously looks good that, yeah, you have work, you have a beautiful wife, you have a young son and everything, but there's just too much on your shoulders that it's hard to be happy then. So it shows that really well, again, kind of like many of the films that we have referenced in these videos.
yeah, I think it's like there's so much being set up in the film. So first, and it's everything is like in between the lines, right? So that's why I said, like, it made me think of this thing like the end of Leave It to Beaver, or the death of Leave It to Beaver. Because what is Leave It to Beaver? This TV show, very much talking about suburban America, black and white, where the father works, you know, the children are home, the mother is there, the food's being put on the table, they have everything they could need, and they're well comfortable, and no one's tired, and everything is fine, right? But in this film already, we're starting with that is now no longer the case, because James Mason's character, Ed Avery, he's a teacher. So he has a respectable job. He is a professional. He's a member, important, like a good member of society. He's a good person. There's nothing off about him. And he takes, like you said, he's doing this second job, and we learn that he's hiding this second job from his wife, because it's almost like he says that she'll think it's beneath him. So he's already like, he needs to keep up the myth. We're in the world, and this is very similar to what we even discussed in the Sopranos talk, that it's now about keeping up the myth. So he has to work 2 jobs to keep up the myth. The thing has died. It's no longer a reality. As a teacher, he can't afford to have his wife actually not working and being at home and taking care of the child, and he has to cover it, and no one can know either. So there's this facade to it all going on, and then there are these little slight, because the dialogue is amazing, the dialogue gives over, so there's slight little things that he's saying. At one point, there's this boiler, the disgusting boiler you see in the back, clearly needs replacing, and then there's some repairs that are needed, and he's like, oh, I can't afford that. I'm not a plumber. So there's this shock now. There's this contrast. You have a plumber job. You would think, well, plumber is a less educated job. It's a it's a skilled job and all that, but it's different. It doesn't require the same kind of education that maybe he needed to become a teacher, and he's responsible for the minds of American kids growing up, and he's not earning enough. He's not earning as much as a plumber, and so there's this taking down of everything that's going on, the facade. So now we're in this world, and then insult to injury, he has health problems, and he can't really afford in some ways to have that health problem.
Yeah, his life is like a shock, going from shock to shock to shock. Like there's so many things that he has to worry about, and even when he gets the diagnosis of his illness, that yeah, you are gonna die soon if you don't take this experimental drug, and that's obviously horrible. But we could now kind of start talking about how it transitions from that to the insanity. So obviously his persona goes from very anxious and jealous and kind of, you could say, weak to something completely different, like very intense, very confident, very powerful and controlling. So there are many kind of highlight scenes that are quite funny actually. Like one that I like a lot is like when they go to the clothing store and he's just like to his wife that just pick this dress and this dress and this dress. Like we don't have any money, but let's just do it and live kind of in this crazy way. And then another highlight scene is of course in the school when he's just talking about like how these young Americans, they are too sensitive. We need to go back to the roots and make them like men and stuff like that. So that's also feels like very relevant today, even though this film is like 70 years old, that there are still people like that who think that we need to go back to the World War II mentality when American soldiers went to the beaches of Normandy and they were all tough and stuff. So those scenes are like, again, they tell you so much about the American mindset, but at the same time they are also just very hilarious in a dark way and also in a satirical way.
100%. And the whole thing about him having this kind of life-threatening illness, obviously, you can look at literally and metaphorically, so maybe we won't go too much into that. But now he's getting this pill, right? This is, you just take this, and it's gonna make sure you don't die. And of course, it has these side effects that we're gonna learn about. So, but right away, we're now getting this dichotomy between condition and symptom. Right? You're trying to cure some of the symptoms, but what is the condition resulting in the symptom? It can be the strain of his daily life. It could be that he is not being he's not earning enough to meet what is expected of him of society, but no one's willing to admit that anymore and make those changes. So it's creating that strain. And then like you said, there's also this whole thing where clearly he's a teacher, clearly he's a present teacher, he cares about his students, he's trying to teach at a higher level and really deliver a good education, so that's also a strain on him. But then everything around him is so dull. If you're a strained person, I guess another double bill that would go with this film is Abigail's Party. There's similar themes to Abigail's Party going on in there as well. The constraints, and same with Autumn Afternoon, the constraints are there. He's in a constrained, structured world. And yet he is just being weighed down in a way, being taken part by these constraints. And that's the real condition. Whereas his illness is a symptom, but it's not the condition of society. And then the pill is giving him a false sense of superiority. That could be a metaphor for, I guess, America in this time period, because we're talking 1956 and it's post-war and all that. And there's this post-war affluence, but clearly this post-war affluence seems to be cracking up in terms of what Nicholas Ray is exploring. So there's this facade, there's this, and then, but every time he would have this megalomaniac highs from his pills and bursts of confidence, he's followed up by this depression. And then he wants to counteract that by taking more pills. So it's like you're creating this facade, but behind the facade, there's something rotten. There's something wrong. Something is wrong in the state of Denmark. And then it's to take from Shakespeare, um, and he's trying to cover it further and cover up further, and yet he's also getting support. So, like you said, one of my favorite scenes is that PTA where the parents come and he just goes off the hinges, like our favorite pulpit beater, um, Jordan Peterson. So he reminded me a lot of Jordan Peterson in that way, because the whole similar thing about how he was on certain like um, some drugs, some psychiatric drugs, and then he had to go to Russia to get off his dependency, and they had to put him in a coma. But just prior to that, he had this really, these really megalomaniac outbursts and this very surety about what's right and what's wrong. So it made me think a lot about present day and a lot of these personalities maybe hiding behind medication, maybe hiding behind this facade of very strong, clear ideas, and behind that, there's all this lack, and all this destructiveness in the wake, and very scary things happening, as we'll continue to discuss.
Yeah, you brought up so many interesting points there. One that I will mention is kind of, you mentioned that whether his sickness is kind of more like literal or metaphorical, because when you think of it, his whole life is kind of like on a line all the time, that even a smallest thing can kind of destroy his whole life because they don't have money or anything. So when he gets that diagnosis that you might die in a year or two, like that's not necessarily that like big when it comes to his life, because it just could be that like their car breaks down or something, and that will destroy their life. So because their life is already hanging by the thread all the time. So yeah, that's kind of like the sickness is more about his life in general and not just about the sickness, I think. But yeah, to me also, like I think I also quickly mentioned, it is just it's so relevant today and makes you think of these, I mean, thinkers of today, these kind of pseudo intellectual thinkers who are just, yeah, the society is ruined now by feminism or whatever. We need to go back to the 50s. And some of the most insane people say that even like women shouldn't have the right to vote, that was a mistake and things like that. So yeah, it makes you think of the kind of current cultural climate, not to go into politics too much, but it is like very current in that way. And even some of the things that they like more specifically talk about, like again, sensitivity and emotional health and stuff like that, even though again in the 50s they didn't really care about their stuff, even though they talk here like they care about it, but they didn't really. But of course these days it's the same, that people are too sensitive, people get mental illness too easily, and we get all of these diagnoses, even though it's just your average person's sadness is like categorized as depression now. Some of these people might say something like that, and so it's yeah, it's very current in that way. And I think what I love about this film and what I love about this type of genre in general is that it kind of mixes kind of social commentary with like dark humor and things like that, because I absolutely love dark humor, and I love these films that can be taken as disturbing and funny at the same time. Although as I have a bit of a weird brain, I usually tend to focus more on the funny things about these weird films. Like again, I always say that my favorite three comedies are The Big Lebowski, The Shining, and Blue Velvet, because I find Blue Velvet and The Shining like absolutely hilarious, even though they're supposed to be disturbing, and that kind of logic also applies to a film like this.
Yeah, absolutely, because yeah, the humor enhances in some ways for me the sense of terror. I mean, even that's why in a lot of even horror movies you're gonna have humor, but this kind of humor is so, yeah, it's so powerful, because yes, you do laugh, you are kind of watching the events and you're like, ah, look at him, he's like unhinged, but then there's also all this going on, like where it's like he's given this pill, but the pill doesn't remove his delusions. The pill doesn't reveal truth to him. So he gets this pill and then he goes on a high. And on this high where he thinks he's now has that power and masculinity or whatever you want to think about that he's supposed to have as a man in the society, but his actual problems haven't been solved. So even when he takes his wife for dress shopping, it's very clear they can't afford to buy those dresses for his wife. That's constantly going on. We can't afford this. And he's like, forget about it. Are you earning the money or I am? So this whole aspect that you even see in consumerism, the critique is already there, where it's like something's being used to enable you to keep consuming or doing things when they're really foreclosed from you. But he's not railing against the forces. So there are these invisible forces. He's not recognizing them. He's not turning around and saying, oh, I see the invisible forces that are now constraining me and excluding me from things that I actually should be able to do that. Like I should be able to get my wife nice things. Or maybe you can go deeper and say, is the only way to care for your wife is to get her nice things? So there's a question in there too. So again, it's like the roots of escapism. The solution to his problems is to escape, to become someone else, to be a more confident self, to pretend you have the money to do these things, and all these kinds of things. And it solves nothing, as we see, and it just gets worse and worse. And it's also telling that the only threat to him is played by Walter Matthau, the character Wally Gibbs, and he's a PE teacher. So kind of representing that kind of old schoolness. Oh yeah, he's physically fit, he's a PE teacher, oh he's healthy, and all this stuff, and this insecurity, this impotence, like you said, like you're talking about Lost Highway and the themes of like impotence and all that kind of stuff in Lost Highway. It's here. He's really scared about that impotence. Oh, this PE teacher is going to come, this masculine PE teacher going to take his wife, and I'm sick and I'm ill and I need these pills to kind of keep going. And then it leads to this, like, once again, this megalomania, this getting on a pulpit and these extreme thoughts, and everyone is weakening, but I'm the strong man. And the strong man is not strong. He's just taking pills. That's what making him a strong man. Yeah. So really, really like strong satire in this film and strong critique.
Yeah, it's a film of kind of conflicts and balances and imbalances, because it's like, how do you balance your family life by loving your son, but also being tough and trying to mold your son into being something great and someone who can survive and succeed in life. And then there's also the balance again, the family life and the work, and then how do you treat your wife when you cannot even be kind of happy like who you are and what you do in life. So how can you kind of treat other people well either when you kind of your own life is so trashy and awful as well. And one thing I want to mention, so that I won't forget, is kind of the religious aspect of this film that I find very interesting when he's thinking of killing his own son and Abraham. And there's this like thing that obviously people like cherry pick things from the Bible, because obviously in the Bible it says lots of good stuff as well, that you could care about other people and try to help them and help people who are kind of beneath you or weaker than you. Like you could imagine that your child is weaker than you, but then he just focuses on this one thing, Abraham. Yeah, I need to do this, and it's a very disturbing and provocative scene, but also kind of funny in a way, because I just love James Mason's performance here. He's just absolutely perfect. Like sometimes he's a bit more subtle and sometimes just absolutely unhinged. And
yeah, and once again, who does that remind you of? Someone who's now commenting on, phenomenon in society, and then you go back to the Bible, and all the answers are there. And I'm not. This is not meant to offend against that or against the Bible or anything. That's not my point in saying that. But and I don't think that's exactly Nicholas Ray's point. But like you said, it's about balances and imbalances, right? That's a very good point you made. It's about balances and imbalances, and what balances a person. What is a source of sanity? What is the balance? And I believe the ultimate thesis is that the soul, the spirit, like there's a spirit, there's something deeper than this. So you see this guy going on this odyssey, almost like naked as well, like Mike Lee's Naked. Like this person's going through an odyssey, like going to go search for something. And so now he's unhealthy, he's imbalanced, like you said. And yeah, we see it as a more physical ailment. But if you take a step back and just think about it as an ailment, there's something that's ailing him. And then the first thing is to go to medication, which we see even today, right? You don't feel good, you feel a little depressed, you feel this, you feel that. There's medication. Go get the medication. All will be fine. He's taking the medication. It gives him these highs, but it's not solving it. Underneath, he's still crashing. He's still like, okay, something's wrong. He's in search of what's missing. So he then turns to consumption, right? Consumption, that's not feeding the soul. And then that kind of extremism, that these opinions, and it's a society that's corrupt, and that's not solving it. So then like he comes to religion. And now he's looking in religion for something to ail what's missing. But what he's turning to in religion is the literalism, or he's missing the point. And so he's reading into it what he wants to read into it, and he's not taking the questions that the Bible probably would raise in his life about what's going on, and it's resulting in this kind of empty spirit. So it's like you're solving all the symptoms again, but you're not solving the condition, the emptiness of spirit, the emptiness of soul, the emptiness of meaning, the emptiness of purpose. We're not helping people do that. We're just helping them take pills and control their symptoms, and we're telling them to go buy things, and we're telling them, like this kind of thing. So it's like it's about a society lost. It's about the people in the society being lost, and the society providing them no solace for the reasons they're feeling lost.
Yeah, so it's a battle of again the internal and external and micro and macro. So, and when he again tries to use the external things to justify his behavior and also find the reasons for his illnesses, he kind of focuses on the wrong things, like again religion and again the decadence of youth, because they aren't learning these good values. But he should maybe be focusing on this world where you have to work all day long and to just support your family. Maybe he should look at the economic system and the toxic work culture and things like that, and you could find the reason for your pain from there if you need to find an external reason. But then he looks at the wrong sources all the time. And of course, if we get into the ending as well, one of the interesting things is that they say that even though he again went absolutely crazy, that we are still gonna give him cortisone, but just we are gonna control the dosage. So it's like, what does that say? That it made him absolutely insane, but we are still gonna continue doing that. And then they say to the family something like that, all that he needs now is your love, or that you need to love him a lot, even though he almost killed his son and things like that. So it's kind of, there's so much to analyze in the ending and all the things they say, and is it even a happy ending? Like again, when they say that the cortisone thing, so it kind of maybe says to you that maybe it will feel like it was, so maybe it will continue the same insanity, even though it looks like a happy family moment for a bit.
I completely agree with you, and I feel like the ending. That's why I'm like you said, like you could tell just by watching the movie, the studio is saying, no, you can't kind of go where you want to go now, and you got to bring it back in. But I feel like he effectively subverted it, where the ending to me felt very unsettled for those exact reasons that you said. I was like, nothing is solved, right? They're just like, oh yeah, he's an addict. That's like you're sitting there and saying, oh, this person's addicted to alcohol, but it's fine now. Like they were like abusing people and they were doing these things, but that's fine, because what we'll do is we'll just give them less alcohol and it should be fine. And of course not. He's still has to, like you said, he still has to use that substance. How are they going to control it? And you just get this feeling that's not a solution. Like just keeping him alive, just keeping people alive is not a solution. We need something that can help people with the problems they're experiencing, and these problems that are actually being brought on by societal constructs and the systems who are choosing to employ, the stratifications in society, and the values we fed into them. That it's like, again, about, you know, washing machines or like boilers or whatever. This is what it's about, this facade. You come home and there's this happy home, but it's not a happy home. And I think it's absolutely terrifying when you think about what Nicholas Ray was saying in this film, especially for the time period that was coming out, because we think about people who killed their children as very deranged, but what Nicholas Ray is positing in this film is a perfectly normal guy, well-meaning person, just trying to earn a living, can get into a state where he could entertain the idea of just going and killing his son for believing that the son is corrupt and there's no like saving him. How disturbing of an idea is that? It's not someone deranged, it's someone totally normal, trying to be a good husband, trying to do all these things, ultimately reaching that point, and the solution is not a solution. Just keep taking that drug. Like you said, how does that solve anything?
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's terrifying as a film. This film terrified me in a way, because I'm like, yeah, this is scary, because it's saying so well what we all need to think about.
Yeah, it's still, again, the same type of alienation and pressure and anxiety is still happening today. Again, in some ways it might be not as bad as back then, but some ways it might be even worse, because at least in the 50s you knew that you are gonna get a job, and again, things weren't as expensive and stuff, but now that stuff is even worse, so it makes you look at the film now in a bit of a different light than it would have in the 50s. And it's just also kind of very disturbing how we see these kind of surface level things, like, again, shopping for clothes and things like that, that is supposed to make us happy, even though we have like very deep mental illness, very deep issues in our souls and things like that. But we try to keep ourselves content by shopping clothes or doing something like this, even though it doesn't really help at all. It just gives you that brief moment of escapism. But this society we live in just wants that yeah, there's like a Marvel movie that makes you happy for a little moment, that you can the next day go slave away at work and just be happy in your situation, even though it's a pretty sad life that he and we as people are often living. But the society can, again, manipulate you into thinking that you have it pretty good by these types of surface level things.
Yeah, you're so right. It's like, in a way, yeah, you can take it one level up, and he's saying even as a humanity, we've maybe solved some surface things. It looks nicer, but we haven't even come close to solving that void we feel, the struggles we have, the conflicts we have, the confusion, or we don't even understand people and what they need. We have decided on a very surface level what people need, but as Maslow's hierarchy of needs goes, if you believe in that, that when you solve the basic problems, then there are higher things that, right? Because if your basic concern is food and all, and that make you comfortable enough, then it doesn't stop there. You're gonna now search. You're gonna have the ability to now search deeper, and that's gonna uncover more needs that need to be solved. And we kind of wanna, like you said, we want to cap it. We want to say, okay, this is all solved, so you couldn't possibly have anything else that's wrong. Well, if that's the case, then where do these tragedies? How do these tragedies happen? Because we know for a fact that this film is not. Yeah, it can be humorous, it can be exaggerated in its performances, and even the actors that are chosen aesthetically, the performances create this otherworldliness. But we know very much that there's nothing otherworldly about what's happening. This kind of tragedy can happen, and that's what's terrifying.
And it shows that again, even though as a society and in the world we've gotten more free, but at the same time we feel more trapped and caged. And we see that again, that we are caged by the society and what it makes us to do with our lives. But we also have that kind of inner cage, the cage of our minds with our anxieties and depressions that are caused by the external cage that is the society. So it's again this kind of wheel that you cannot escape, kind of like we talked about in an autumn afternoon. And even though if this world like feels like you have the freedom, like you can choose what you study and you can affect like who you marry and where you go to work, but at the same time there's not that much freedom, because in the end it's always that, yeah, you study, you go to work, you try to get married, it's always that same thing, and you cannot really escape that wheel even if you want to do something else. So we really aren't that free, but there's that kind of facade of freedom and that kind of fake freedom in a way. And just like we talked about with Conan the Barbarian, that yeah, we have lots of choices, but when the choices are Burger King, Wendy's and McDonald's, you don't really have choices, but it just feels like you have choices. Yeah,
it's so true. Like everything you're saying is very true, and definitely it's at the heart of the film, for sure. And also is the question of what's the purpose of education, because I don't feel it's a coincidence that he chose the profession to be a teacher, because it does create the teacher pupil thing. What example are you setting? What are you supposed to actually educate your kids about? And then with his diatribes, the whole politicization of education, that education is really for, you know, enhancing political means. So education versus propaganda and all that sort of thing. So you're really, I mean, you're spot on, I think, with everything you're saying.
and there's this also kind of bit of idea about nostalgia when he has the football, I think, and yeah, gives it to his son, and yeah, my glory days, I was so fast and good.
Oh yeah.
And now that he has taken the pill, he feels like maybe he can reach those heights again, as he's back to that kind of youthful, kind of rebellious mindset, that kind of toughness and masculinity. But then he ends up still being trapped and caged in the end when he has to go to the hospital and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a harsh world, right? Like even with the football thing with the son, it's like, you're never going to make it. It's constantly this, you're never going to make it. So he's taking out his frustrations, obviously, because we talked about being a salaryman and all this stuff. So his frustrations of not making it and seeing the world just growing more difficult, he's like, you're not going to make it. And he's putting all this pressure. And I think it echoes even what's going on today, because what does it take to make it in this world now is immense. Like people can't do what their parents did and even afford a home or a place to live. And so that harshness continues. You just gotta go and be all these things, and all there is to worship like the Elon Musks, and oh, you gotta go to extreme levels, and oh, you gotta be like this guy, and you gotta go become a billionaire. And that's not a That's not a societal solution. Exceptionalism is not a societal solution, right? It's like exceptionalism, yes, can be celebrated or whatever, but at the same time, it's not a solution. And you see that the condition was already existing from that point, probably even before that. If Nicholas Ray is picking up on it, then it's probably been there happening for a while. So yeah, both an entertaining, kind of film I do really appreciate. That it is entertaining, it is well made, it is kind of iconic in how it's shot, but then it's also has something there. There's substance behind all the kind of what parts that are entertaining, or they make you laugh, or they give you thrills. There's something real meaningful there too.
It's interesting how his son is kind of like the main mirror to him, that he sees his own failures in his son, that you are not gonna make it because he didn't himself make it that well, as he's quite poor, even though he does 2 jobs and constant anxiety and everything. He didn't become a football star or anything, so that's why he gets so angry at his son, because he sees himself in it, and by killing his son, he can kind of kill the failure in himself as well. Yeah, I think that, and then kind of become and transcend into something different, maybe. So,
yeah. And once again, you mentioned this word anxiety, and I realized, there's this sense of anxiety the whole time with him in the whole film, right? All the things he's anxious about. I can't pay the bills. I don't earn enough. I'm not enough of a man. I'm a failure. My son's going to be a failure. Like all his anxieties, all his internal anxieties. And it's like the pill can't take away his anxieties. And neither can the shopping, and neither can the way he's reading the Bible, for example. Like those things are not helping him take away his anxieties, his fears, his pressures.
Yeah. Maybe we sum it up now, as we've talked for an hour, I think, almost. So.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but this is definitely one of Nicholas Ray's best films. It's hard to say what is his best film. In a Lonely Place is so good, and Johnny Guitar is so good. I really like On Dangerous Ground as well, and you mentioned The Last Man. That's really good as well. So such a great body of work, and I still have some films to watch as well from him. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's hard to tell what's his best. You'd have to kind of watch it again and then think about. But yeah, very worthwhile filmmaker, very worthwhile films, at the very least.
Yeah. But anyway, this was another interesting discussion, and we will return in a couple of weeks. Then we will talk about Kichu Yoshida's Heroic Purgatory, which is gonna be the most difficult chat so far. But maybe we'll surprise ourselves like we did with Nostalgia and actually say something interesting about the film. And then we will talk about Hou Xiaoshen's Millennium Mambo, which isn't very easy film either, but definitely easier than Heroic Purgatory. And I'll just run through the films that we have lined up after that as well. So we have Tarkovsky's Stalker, then Eteroskola's A Special Day. Wow. Then after that we have Shinua Tsukamoto's Kotoko and Koreeda's Like Father, Like Son. And then after that, more Koreeda with his first feature film, Maporoshi. And with Maporoshi, we will talk about Jacques Rivets, Celine and Julie Gogo. Another very difficult film, but very interesting. Great lineup for the rest of the
summer. Yeah, wow. A very different list of summer watches. I like it. Yeah.
Lots of challenging films, but very interesting ones. Yeah, I think you are going to like probably all of them, so we'll see.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Yeah, great lineup.
So that lineup should run us through like mid-August or something like that. So.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens after that with the films I choose. But
yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah. But thanks for watching this episode. Come back in 2 weeks when we do the next episodes, and don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.